So I'm going to talk a little bit about a data set that we also collected that hasn't been included in any of the presentations so far, but you may have heard mentioned in passing. This is the web scraping data that we collected as part of the project. I'll talk very briefly about that and the data behind it. And then in the final presentation, Danny will go into a lot more detail about that side of things. So I'm really interested in using this data to look at polarization together with the co-authors that you see listed here, and the dynamics that might be at play, particularly in social media spaces, which are increasingly important in political communication. We can see in the trend line here on Google Trends, an increasing, we might say, but very varied trend in interest in polarization over time. And if we look at also expert surveys, there the sense in European countries too is that there's been a general upward trend over the last, say, 20 years, but particularly since the financial crisis. There are also an increase in polarization. What do we mean when we talk about polarization? So the definition that we're working with here, at least, is a fairly standard definition of two mutually antagonistic camps. So in our case, we're thinking particularly of political groups, be it political parties or supporters of those parties or individuals with particular attitudes. So we see that perhaps this trend is increasing in recent years. Perhaps there's some variation by country or by region too. But I think a common theme that we've had in some of the panels and presentations is that we shouldn't automatically assume that our instinct about these issues is correct, that we might want to go a little bit deeper in how to measure these things and how to think about them. This is particularly important when we think about online spaces and social media too, given the relative novelty of those forms of communication. We think there might be some interesting findings to uncover there. So what do we think, according to previous research, might be driving these trends in polarization? So there are various explanations, but one that's a fairly common finding is this idea that it starts from the top, that the parties are polarized and that this drives polarization at lower levels too. It's not the only explanation, but it's the one that we're working with, at least in this regard. So how can we study this? Where can we find more information about this that might give us a good idea about the accuracy or inaccuracy of our impressions of polarization? One place to look for that is just where the parties are communicating. So we see this in news articles, we see it in the party manifestos, and of course, anyone with a smartphone or a laptop will know we see it on social media too. So a lot of parties and their members and elected officials, they communicate their messages on these platforms. So as I said, we're interested in how this might operate in online spaces. You often hear this refrain, Twitter is not real life, and I think that's true, but it is Twitter, and people use it, people communicate using Twitter, and even perhaps for younger generations, it becomes increasingly important, not only Twitter, or maybe not Twitter at all these days, but other similar online spaces. So how can we look at this content and how can we measure it? For this, we have our ActEU consortium, and especially the team working on the web scraping data. So this was led by Danny and his team in Oviedo, with the support of all of our members to collect various different online sources. So I'm thinking today about the content that was collected via Twitter. Um, this is a huge data set. We have many tweets. We have many news articles and all the rest of it as well. So today, just to simplify things, I'm really looking at tweets that were made in July and August of last year by politicians in Germany and the responses to those tweets. So there are 733 members of parliament in Germany, of which 587 have a Twitter account. During this time, they tweeted 30,000 times, so quite a lot of active fingers tapping away on the smartphones among the German elected officials. So to give you an overview of the content that we collected, specifically related to one of our key themes, which is migration. So I'm not looking, in today's presentation, I'm not looking at the gender or the climate change dynamics, but just about migration. And here we can see just the pure sort of quantity of tweets during that time, and the parties, the German political parties, and their relative comparative activity around the issue of immigration during those 2 months. You may recognize the party colors. I guess the axes on the graph are maybe a little small to read, but that light blue you see is the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland. The yellow there, that's the second highest, that's the FDP, the Liberal Party. And the green column, obviously, is the Greens. Those are the three most active on this issue. The other parties slightly lower levels in terms of their tweets related to immigration. Then something we can also do with this data is look at the positions. Are these tweets pro-immigration? Are they anti-immigration? Are they just neutral, or are they somehow unclear in their content? I must say many of them I would say are unclear or neutral. So this is a bit of an issue that we have to work with over the coming months to try and get a more accurate assessment of the picture. But at least I can show you some of the preliminary findings that we have from the responses to these tweets from members of the public. And there you see the timeline from July to the end of August, and the red bars there are the more negative, more anti-immigration tweets, and the gray is neutral, and the blue, if you can even see it, are the more positive tweets about immigration. So this perhaps tells us something about the tone and the idea we might have about polarization in this particular space. If I lay over that just the quantity of tweets by the Green Party, there you can see a fairly high quantity of tweets early in the timeline, many fewer tweets later in the timeline, but it doesn't seem to have any relationship or any effect on the quantity of positivity or negativity from members of the public. So whatever we might say, looking at this graph, whatever the Greens tweeting about immigration doesn't seem to be having an effect on the responses one way or another. If we do the same for the AfD, the far-right party, there we also see not really a connection between the two sources. So the quantity there of the AfD tweets about immigration, and again the responses from the public, it's hard to really discern a trend out of those two sources. So what does this tell us? Well, for now, not very much. Only that really this platform and this community, and perhaps others online, don't appear to be responsive to messaging from political actors one way or another. But that there may be already on Twitter, I think it may be no surprise, already signs of asymmetrical polarization, so a highly negative attitude. So this raises some questions to me, perhaps others in the audience have thoughts on this about really whether these types of spaces, not only Twitter but other online platforms, whether they are really the best medium for this kind of communication and for politicians to try to send out their messages, and if there's any alternative or any other means that perhaps would be more effective for their aims. So I'd be interested to hear any thoughts on that. We have further steps to go with this data to look at other countries, other contexts. We have the other issues there as well, so perhaps we can dig into those and also make a comparison with other existing sources like the manifestos or the press releases. Good timing. So that's all for me. Thanks very much for your attention.